joining, but welcome to the Essence for Agility meetup. This has been going for a while, and if you've been with us for some time, then you'll be aware that it's not normally me that's sat here doing the introductions. It's normally Nabil, but I'm sitting here with some trepidation because Nabil is very good, but also he's decided to step back and I'll be taking over. So this is my first proper hosting of the meetup. So that's my excuse for all the mistakes that are going to happen. But if you're not aware, the Essence for Agility meetup is a community aimed to explore Essence, which is a standard to describe all practices and methods, to better enable us to pick the right set of practices to suit our context, regardless of which method they belong to, and also to help us improve our application of a method. So for those of you that are familiar with the flow system, but not Essence, there's quite a lot in there that's quite similar, as we'll explore a bit later. So just briefly to introduce myself, my name is Simon Girvan. I've been working quite in depth with Essence for the past 2 years. And before that, I've been an Agile coach for some time. And I've got both bits of the Essence and Agility from the meetup title, you'll be pleased to hear. I'm also the co-author of a book called Agile from First Principles, just to prove that I've got something other people think is worth listening to say. I'm joined today by two people who may not need any introduction, but I'll give them one nevertheless. So Ivar Jakobsen is nicknamed the father of software engineering, as his contributions span over 50 years, although you never know he's that vintage. In particular as co-founder of Essence, but you also probably know his work through UML, the Rational Unified Process, and component architecture, and many other things. And Nigel Thurlow is the former chief of Agile at Toyota, currently the chief executive of the Flow Consortium, a Forbes top 10 author, and the co-creator of the Flow system. And if you've not heard of the Flow system, then you'll be hearing a bit more about it over the course of the next hour. So we're going to hear from Nigel and Ivar talking about how their respective innovations came about. We'll learn about why they're even more relevant today, get an insight into just how Essence and the Flow system are working together by exploring one of the Flow system practices that's been essentialized. And there'll be time for questions. And if you stay till the end, there's a prize draw. We can win as yet unreleased Nigel's new book, which will be signed, and we'll tell you how you can enter that prize draw at the end. So you've got to wait until the end. We're going to be making the recording available as well if you want to watch it again, or if you're not able to make it live. So unless there's any questions, just a quick look in the chat, if I can find it. I think what I'd probably like to do is to start by asking Ivar and Nigel to tell us a bit about the heritage and the inspiration behind their two innovations and why they're still relevant. And I think, Ivar, did you want me to show some slides for that to kickstart us, or do you want to?
I can try to share my screen. There it is, yes. Okay. So, yeah, it's... today we are going to talk about the flow system and how that works together with Essence, or the other way around. They are pieces of a puzzle. So Essence and the flow system were created separately and independently, and but now they are partnering. And I will tell a little about the background, the history, and I will, Nigel, I will also talk about your stuff. So, but I will ask you to add to that.
I will definitely add some flavor. Don't worry about that.
I hope so. So we co-created, because there were other people involved in creation of RUP, Rational Unified Process, which if you go 20 plus years back, it was the most popular method ever. Everyone wanted to become a RUP consultant because that is where you made money. And every big company adopted RUP all around the world. I travel around the world to participate in all kinds of meetings. I felt it was quite ridiculous that once they had had a meeting with me, next day we signed a contract with Rational, which actually was the owner of it, in millions of dollars. And I felt that was totally wrong. But that was a fact. Next, at the same time in year 2000, I actually created a company to develop support, AI support for rational unified process. There was one way to make RUP light, and that was big, heavy, several thousand pages. But one way would be to reduce this amount by using AI support, intelligent agents, small object-oriented expert systems. We call them actually a developer's assistant, which basically was a synonym to co-pilot. So we had co-pilots 20 plus years ago. This failed for two good reasons. One, since RUP failed and went down dramatically, Waypoint supported RUP. And the other was that the Agile movement came and basically hated is the right word, anything that had to do with artificial intelligence. That was not popular at that time. But we learned a lot. We learned a lot about it, and we knew it would come back one day. In 2010, we presented Essence, and Essence was a common ground, something that every method could have, should have, and it became a standard 4 years later. So it was clean from anything that was specific for a particular method. Anybody could accept it. We, a couple of years later, 2016, Nigel developed the Scrum with Toyota way. And we, in a couple of years later, we wrote a book, 4 or 5 people together, wrote a book about the essentials, the Essence method and its use cases. The book was titled The Essentials of Modern Software Engineering. We, at basically the same time, the Flow System book was published, and we will hear more about it. And now, 2023, we are seeing with Flow System playbook and Essence being combined. To do that in a meaningful, it's too much information to have in book shape. You need to have it in some kind of tool, and for a tool that supports Essence and support the Flow System is TeamSpace. It's a very new tool. You probably have never seen anything similar, and so that is the partnership between these two things. And this meetup will explore how the Flow System and Essence have partnered to benefit the users. The Flow System and Essence are pieces of a puzzle. Where does it come from? Yeah, because there is very little overlap between them. Essence focus on adoption, making adoption dramatically simpler than we have today. And it's developed, of course, not for the Flow System only, but today there are 8 of them famous methodologists that have signed up and used Essence to describe their methods and practices, just for adoption become better. The Flow System has a rich content, and that is why we have very small overlap, and it's a very good partnership. So let me tell about where does all this come from. Well, in year 2000 something, I felt, as I said, the situation was ridiculous. I was a guru traveling around the world, and people followed my advice more than I actually wished. And I felt that role is not what the industry should have. We look like a fashion industry. Basically, we throw out one generation of methods with another one after some years. We had a sequence of years, where basically every popular method in the past has been killed by a new generation of things. And there were probably good things in the early ones that could have been kept. We have methods war. This is not a normal marketing war. This is more like a religious war with sects around it and so on. Gurus instead of experts. We have no common ground between methods. And there is a split between industry practice and academic. These are really crazy things. I've written about it in on LinkedIn articles. So if you're interested, you can follow up more. And we also saw some killer use cases, meaning things that really dramatically change how we deal with methods. We can build an ecosystem of practices where teams can select the practice they want to have and create their own method. That's absolutely unique. We have never been able to do that in the past. And Essence gamify software development. So teams get an active instead of a passive user experience. Every method in the past have been, as far as I know, passive, meaning you learn with slideware, you have slides and books and all kinds of things, but you are still passive. Whereas with Essence, the user experience is active. You learn by playing different kinds of games, and there are hundreds of games you can play, and that is thanks to that Essence have a deep meaning. And we bridge the gap between learning and delivery. So in most methodologies focus on the learning phase and not really on the delivery. Essence help you to identify things to do and put in the Jira if to plan and deliver. And one of the most interesting things that happened lately is that organizations comply efficiently with standards from government. That has been verified and tested. Now, the waypointer experience, that was a failure. We invested quite a lot in doing that, but we learned something. This was already year 2004. Waypointer got a productivity product award from Dr. Dobbs journal, and it was there is an article written about it from that time. If you look at it, you will find it's the thinking is very much the same as today with co-pilots. So the value we have learned is that by having Essence, we are not dependent on one particular method. Instead, we have a playground. And from this playground, we can ask tools like ChatGPT to prompt questions, or we can prompt questions from the playground that ChatGPT can respond to. It's enormous value. We're actually going to give a presentation 2 weeks from now, Simon and I, in Lisbon at this conference. And basically the title of that is that AI plus Essence is fundamentally much better than just AI. That would be very...
Thank you, Ivar. Now we've talked a bit about the heritage of Essence. I think it'd be good to hear from Nigel about the heritage of the flow system, and then we can move on to understand a little bit more about what they each are, and then we can see some things in practice and also get a bit of interaction with the audience. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Now, you might have been muted, Nigel.
Schoolboy error there, you know. You'd think I'd got this right by spending my life in front of a damn video camera. And I see Tom's joined us. Tom, I will reply to your email. I've been so busy traveling, I just haven't got round to it. But I even put you on my WhatsApp to message you. So I just want to use this to say I will talk to you, I promise. Anyway, let's move on a bit. So look, Eva's right. For people who know me, I've been working in sort of this sort of lean and agile space for years. Spent a lot of time with Toyota, was able to develop sort of some synergies between the lean and agile space in Toyota. And for the people who don't think Toyota use the word lean, they're wrong. They actually have a lean center in the United Kingdom down in Deeside where they make engines and things. And they actually teach lean thinking there. So we decided, I got together with a professor from the University of North Texas while I was working at Toyota, got together with a colleague of mine, Brian Rivera Ponch, who's a ex-naval aviator, does a lot with high performance teams, high reliability organizations. And we started to bring together different aspects of study, complexity thinking, stuff that Dave Snowden's heavily into, and we've done a lot of collaboration with him, a lot of leadership stuff, a lot of team science stuff. But I didn't develop a methodology. This is not a methodology. This is a system and learning, a system of learning and understanding for dealing with complexity, for dealing with complex problems within the organizations and within the environments that we work in. It's a coming together of several methods to better address ambiguity, complexity, and uncertainty. And we use this sort of triple helix approach to sort of bring together different disciplines, different methods, tools, techniques, approaches from different disciplines. We bring the lean world in, the Toyota production system world, complexity thinking, distributed leadership, which is all about empowerment, and team science, how we actually build high performing and effective teams and organizations. It's not a framework. It's not a one size fits all approach. It's not a methodology. It's actually against this concept of universality, which is like Scaled Agile and other people of that nature. We're very customer value focused. The first tenet of all lean thinking, 1946 Toyota production system, customer first. And we flow everything we do. We talk about the flow of value to a customer. We base this around three key disciplines, a foundation of lean thinking, and these three disciplines I've mentioned, and we look at the interconnections, the interconnected nature, the interdependency between them, and how we can combine different disciplines within a given context. And when Simon demonstrates how we use the flow system within Essence, I think you're going to see something that even I'm pretty blown away and stunned by. I never realized the power, not just of what we were creating as a group of guys on the flow system, but also what Essence is able to unlock for what we're doing. So I talk a lot about fitness. I went too far. I talk a lot about fitness in an organization. You'll hear people in the complexity world talking about organization and system fitness, which is the ability to sustain existence while adapting to environmental threats. So resilience is what we want. That's agility. Robustness is the ability to resist things until it breaks, but when it breaks, it's catastrophic. So we want resilience, which is this concept of agility. And fitness is contextual, and it's continuously adapting because we're operating in what we call a complex adaptive system. So whether you look in a mirror and you see the person staring back at you, that's a complex adaptive system. And the environment and the companies, the organization, the governments, the political environment we're in, they're all complex adaptive systems. And so we are looking at ways of continuously adapting as the system adapts within a complex environment. And we're looking at the interaction amongst the component parts of that and methods to help us address that. Now, this is one paper we've written that'll give you a bit of fun. Go read it. Assemblages and line of flight. It talks about emergence and how we can take assemblies, combine them together and create unique emergence. And you will see that within Essence in the demonstration that I think Sam will give you in a couple of minutes. Tools and methods are not fixed. They interact and react differently based upon context, how we apply them, how we use them. They exist in that moment within that context, but as the context shift, the relationships and interactions change and dissolve, not always to be repeated the same again. And this emergence is what we call an assemblage. So when you bring things together as an assembly, different methods, tools, and techniques, you might get novelty emerge, something you didn't predict or didn't expect. And that's considered as assemblage. It's from Deleuzian assemblages theory. The paper will help you read that. And I'll make sure you all get a copy of these slides. So just as a rhizome, and if you know what a rhizome is, ginger is a type of category of plant called a rhizome. There's no predefined plan or structure. It grows and emerges and adapts based on its context and its environment. It has no beginning or end. It's described as always being in the middle. So its shoots, its roots, its leaves, they appear randomly and adapt continuously. And so in comparison to a tree, which is just a reproduction, structured, hierarchical, defined, stable, etc., it's a long-term memory. A rhizome is a short-term memory. It's not a reproduction. So we don't want a method or a technique which is always a reproduction because it doesn't fit every context. We need methods and techniques to evolve and change as we start to look at different contexts. And that's what Essence will give you. So as Dave Snowden's used this phrase a lot, and we use this a lot in our work now, if we want to scale a complex system, we do so by decomposition to the lowest level of coherent granularity, the lowest level we understand clearly, and then recombine these things, not through imitation or replication, but based upon unique contexts. And again, that's what Essence gives us as a tooling. So these are some of the characteristics of assemblages. I'm not going to read them all out, but effectively, they basically have order, stability, status quo, and change at the same time. So they're both stable and unstable at the same time. And assemblages are defined solely by their external relations, composition, mixture, and aggregation. As I say, there's no one size fits all. And assemblages are viewed as emerging. So this is the whole thing we talk about, emergence. And they don't repeat exactly. And as the context changes and as the complex adaptive system evolves and changes, and we're all working in very complex times now, so do the tools, techniques, method, and approaches need to change. So we've published a new book, and I'll mention this because Simon said there's a bit of a competition. So he's going to give you details of how to win this. There is a new book that we have. When I get home back to the States, I'm in Dublin, Ireland at the moment. I get back at the end of the week. I should have the very first copies arriving from the printers. The pre-sale will start on Amazon soon, and then the actual distribution. So there's a chance for you to win this a month before anybody else gets it anywhere else in the world. It's a new book. There's about 700 pages with all the indexing. There's 400 illustrations. There's 40 workbooks, which will also be downloadable, where we go into all these methods, tools, techniques, and approaches and explain how this works in a really big how-to reference and self-study guide. I'm going to stop sharing slides at that point because it's not really a slideshow we want to get into. I wanted to give you a bit of a context for this. And I met Ivar a year or two ago in Lisbon. We sat down talking. I gave him a copy of the book and he said, we need to essentialize this. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so then we got into this, and Professor Turner, who's my key co-author of the new playbook, sat down with Simon and has spent a whole ton of time taking a lot of the pieces of the flow system and breaking them down into a very low level of coherent granularity and assembling them in a way that you can use them in a tool to start addressing some key problems. And to get us there, I want to ask you a little bit. I'm going to do a little Menti with you all, and we're going to do something to prep this on team learning. So if I can get back to my Zoom call, here we go. So I'm going to bring up a Mentimeter screen. I'm going to ask you 4 simple questions. So if you bear with me a second. So we're going to do something on team learning. Now, I've purposely redacted this thing here. There's a QR code on there because in the new book, there's a number of QR codes which will take you to new web pages we're building, but they're not live yet. So I didn't want that QR code published. So I want to do a little experiment on team learning. So I'm going to ask you to do a short survey with you, just 4 questions, which are going to cover some of these topics. So in preparation for that, if you go to menti.com and use the code, admit somebody to the room, use the code 8378-8134. Menti.com, use code 8378-8134. And what I'm going to do, the first question I'm going to ask you, I'm going to do 4 quick questions here. And I want you to select the one that scores the lowest in your organizational context. Okay. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, in your organizational context, do team members listen carefully to one another? Simple Likert scale. If you strongly agree, select 1. If you strongly disagree, select 1. If you strongly agree, select 5, or select one of the other appropriate answers on the scale. And I'm hiding the answers until people stop voting for obvious reasons. So do team members listen carefully to one another within your organizational context, or if you're coaching a client in your client's organizational context? Let's just see how the votes are going to go there. Okay, let's have a quick look at those results. So we're pretty much in agreement here. Some of them neutral, so we're getting a reasonable balance there. Okay, make a note of those, Simon. Okay. So I'll ask you the second question. If something is unclear in your organizational context, do you ask each other questions? So if you're thinking about where you work or in the organization you're coaching, if something is unclear, we ask each other questions. Do you strongly disagree? Number 1, all the way up to number 5, strongly agree. These questions are getting answered fast. That's useful. Okay. Let's have a look at the responses. So we've got people reasonably in agreement here. A couple of neutrals. So we're doing quite well. Actually, I want to work in their organizations. They seem to be doing quite well here. We've got about 7 people disagreeing. So this, and 5 at neutral. So we got about a third of the people in the less popular end. So we could probably look at this as an option. 2 more questions. If a team member gives his or her opinion, he or she subsequently asks for the opinion of others. So you might be good at expressing your own opinion. How good at you are listening to other people's opinions? Again, look at your organizational context or the context in which you coach or support an organization. So people are willing to give their own opinions, but how willing are they to listen to other people's opinions? We probably invited a really positive audience here, Simon. All right, here we go. So there's a heavy disagreement here. I mean, got some people at the far right, but if we look at the neutrals and the disagrees, then we've got the heavy percentage here that they're really good at giving an opinion and not so good at the active listening. So maybe that's a good candidate for us. All right, last question in this section. We encourage one another to look at work from different perspectives. Do we encourage one another to look at our work from different perspectives? These questions are part of some of the tools we've given you in the new book, which help you to do an assessment with groups you're coaching and working with to see how they're equipped for team learning. And we describe team learning in some detail. Okay, let's have a look here. Wow, we've got another strong bias towards disagreement and neutral. There's a few in the agree. So we'll be in a 60-40 split here. So I think question 3 or 4 is probably good candidates, Simon, for the next section. Okay, we'll stop at that and we'll go into error analysis later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Simon, who's going to show you how he and John Turner, Professor Turner, have encoded a lot of the aspects of the team learning part. And there's many parts, there's 33 elements to the flow system, but he's going to take team learning and show you how that's been coded into essence and how people, facilitators, coaches, and teams and groups working together to solve challenges within an organization can use essence, and in this case to improve team learning based on some of those responses we got. Simon.
All right, thank you, Nigel. So I'm sharing the screen. Hopefully you can see that. So this is the tool that Ivar mentioned. And before we talk more about what we've done with team learning in the flow system, let's just have a look at this question. So the scenario that you've just taken part is where you have been assessing your team and you're trying to work out where you're strong and where you're weak in this particular aspect, which is about exploring different perspectives. So we can see here we've got a very concise description, conversational actions of team members to explore, share knowledge, opinions, and different perspectives. Extra prize if you spot any typos. And then, interestingly, we've got a reference here as well. So this is one of the kind of points. I'll pick out one or two, but not hundreds, where Essence and the flow system work really well together. Essence is about the essentials, and it points you with just enough information to somewhere else that you can get further information. So it might be the playbook, but it might be a further reference like this paper by Salvesberg. So of those questions then, I think probably 3 was the one that had the biggest negative proportion. So it was 20 negatives to 9 positives, and 4 was 18 to 13. So let's have a look at that third question, which was this one here. If a team member gives his or her opinion, he or she subsequently asks for the opinion of others. So what I want to do is to think a little bit about this. So this is a standard survey question. And what does the flow system and how does Essence help you interpret those results? And the way it does it is because what we've done is we've looked at this question and we've looked at the playbook and we've determined what elements of team learning practice support team members asking others for their opinion and what the outcomes are. And we can see that on the card. So we can see it's got associated inputs, psychological safety, team training, understanding and valuing difference, and being a team player. And the outcomes of behaving like this are better reflection and action, sharing of information, interaction of team members, asking questions, and seeking feedback. And these are all elements of the team learning practice that have got their own description and sometimes their own references. So the way that we can use this is to say, okay, we've decided as a team, we want to improve how we address this element. So let's look at these things. So here's question 6 on the right, and I can just drag these elements onto the board just so that they're handy to look at. So I'll take those 4 across, and then the outcomes, we'll just drag them on. And then there's a whole bunch of things that we can do. So Ivar talked earlier about Essence supporting gameplay and collaboration, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to do the little survey this evening, today. So one thing we can do is we can start looking at these things and assessing, well, do we understand what these are? So we can click on them and read what psychological safety is. There's a different part of the flow system practice that describes it in more detail, and we could go and look at that. Same for team training. It's another part of the flow system. So to get better at team learning, maybe we should also get better at teamwork training and psychological safety. Then understanding and valuing difference is described here, and being a team player. So one thing we could do is to rank those 4 things about how well we understand them, and maybe pick 1 or 2 to learn more about, do some training, run some sessions so that we can get better at that. Or we might look at the outcomes and decide whether there are outcomes there that we can explicitly work on improving how we as a team perform. So that's one example of how you can use the card and the survey, and we're seeing the connection between the different practice elements. And that's an important part that Essence brings into this. Anything you want to add, Nigel?
Yeah, so what I started to realize as you guys started to encode this in Essence is that actually just taking one simple piece of one simple part of the flow system, which is indeed this one question, you're starting now to look at some of the elements that we start to see interacting and intertwining. So if you take psychological safety, everybody's read Amy Edmondson's work, and we cited in the book, and we've spoken to her in the past. And indeed, she built on work from the 1960s and sort of made the term psychological safety very well known. So you could even drill into psychological safety, which is covered. You can start to look at aspects of how you create the environments for psychological safety, some of the coaching, some of the techniques around that. But then you start to realize that actually many other things you need, like team learning, team training, and other aspects that we cover throughout the sort of aspects of the flow system, requires psychological safety. So as you start to just answer this simple question, about people being willing to practice active listening, we start to think, well, do we have a psychologically safe environment? So maybe we need to do some study on that and drill into that and start to learn about that aspect, because for us to have effective team learning, we need a safe environment where people feel they can speak freely without criticism or ridicule or punishment. So this is where we start to get something that's extremely powerful. And indeed, once this is fully encoded, every element that you're seeing on screen is clickable, and you can drill down into different aspects. And we start to look at, some of the outcomes. And if you looked at one of the outcomes, such as, I don't know, asking questions, you'd be able to click into that, see what that means, see the aspects of how you ask questions, maybe ask better questions. And so this is the power that I'm starting to see emerge from the way Essence works. Simon.
Yes, and you can see here that there's a link back. So asking questions depends upon psychological safety, as Nigel said, and it's one of 6 behaviors for team learning. So some of these things are clustered together. One thing that Nigel kind of touched on that I think is quite important, and this kind of mirrors some of the benefits of Essence, is that we've just looked at one card and a handful of things that are related to that one card. And you can already see that that could be useful for a team who realizes that they don't ask each other's opinion. Now, there's 27 other questions. Each of those other questions has a card that looks the same and normally a slightly different set of inputs and outputs. So you've got quite a lot of different paths through this, but you don't need to go through them all at once. You don't need to answer all 28 questions or even all 4 in this section. You could just answer a subset. And that's kind of similar to the kind of Essence view, which is about focus on the essentials, focus on what's going to help you now. And then once you're good at that, focus on the thing you want to work on next. And if I just zoom out a little bit, appreciate this is going to look a bit overwhelming, but we've got all these different questions, and this is a way you could manually play this game without Mentimeter, where you can pick a question, in that case question 4, and you could drag it on and so on. And then if we look at the actual practice itself in a bit more detail, I'll come back to that picture in a second, you've got a whole load of different elements of team learning that are all part of the practice. But in order to get value from that one question 6, we don't really need to even learn them all. We just need to learn the ones that are related to the thing that we're wanting to improve at.
Yeah, I'm going to add something to that, Simon, because the gameplay thing you were showing just a moment ago, just to go back to that briefly, and then we'll come back to this module here, the thing here, just to reinforce what Simon was showing you, you can actually use this canvas to actually play the game. So as you've got the group and you're sort of considering, people can be bringing those questions and those responses to those questions. And great if you're zooming in a bit, so you can start to see, just take error analysis. We might look at that in a minute. So there's some responses to that, and you can start to drag those down on the landscape. Now, the problem with demonstrating a visual tool in a webinar is the real estate on the screen is very limited. Obviously, when you're using this, like you'd use Mural or a similar type of canvassing tool, it's much easier to do when everybody's collaborating on it. And this tool is the same. It's a dedicated tool which has multi-user collaboration. And then we can start to pull these questions onto that landscape and use this landscape to actually build out our responses. And then beyond that, we can start to then drill into these practices and the various different aspects of it to allow us to start thinking about how we might address what this is revealed. And it doesn't just give us the exploration aspect of this, which is what we're doing in the question landscape here. It also gives us the exploitation. So we can do the exploration, then we can consider what are we going to do then to improve these things. And through the clicking that Simon has been briefly demonstrating, it gives us a way to build a plan of action to say, we need to address these particular aspects. These are the techniques or the methods, approaches we need to use to actually create something as an experiment or as some work that we can go off and actually execute on. Then we can come back and reflect again on that and see where we next need to improve. So I just wanted to show the gameplay aspect of this. Simon, if you go back to the model, and I appreciate this is extremely I mean, if you zoom out a bit, you'll see the expanse of this. There's a lot there. And this is just in one aspect of one part of what we developed in the flow system. Now, if you zoom into those three green things a little bit, then you'll see this is the team learning model, and this comes out of the peer-reviewed literature. We didn't make this stuff up. I'm very fortunate to have a real professor as a co-author who is a deep researcher. So he's one of his specialisms at the University of North Texas is team science. And so we start to look, we've got inputs, processes, outputs, and behaviors defined in the team science literature by a number of notable authors, Eduardo Salas, Scott Tannenbaum, and many, many others, along with John's own colleagues in the University of North Texas. So we're able to visualize this model, and then you're able to click on aspects of this model and look at all the elements that make this up. And Essence has a specific language, how if you describe different elements. And then you can start to say, well, okay, we want to study team design, let's say. And I'm not saying that's already encoded, but assume you clicked on team design and you wanted to learn more about how to design an effective team. You could click on that and then get to the aspects of that and then start building up that canvas of the things you need to learn, things you need to understand, how you evaluate where you are and how you look at the direction of travel you need to go in. Simon.
And if you look at the team design card, you can see some of those relationships that this particular part of the practice has with others. So team design, it's got a description, but it also says that it is creating or helping create team learning culture. And this is the set of questions that all have team design as one of its inputs. And then it's also part of this leading for team learning, which is a particular subset of the practice. It's described over here. So what we have is the ability to kind of drill down and see the relationships between things. In other practices, the relationships aren't just between patterns, they're between other parts of practices like activities or work products, the things that we create, or alphas, which are the core important things that we care about. So you start to see the relationships between things, and that helps you understand them better. So it's not just a glossary of terms, it's starting to get into why those terms matter and how they relate to other elements of the practice.
Yeah, I see this a couple of things, and I apologize for the how small things are. Maybe if you zoom into one of the question card, the reflexivity card, just so people have got something they can actually read. That's better. They can actually see something now rather than just a load of blur on the screen. Plays havoc with your eyes. But the idea behind the whole flow system, I describe it as a system of learning and understanding. And from the very beginning of this, while I was still at Toyota, starting to evolve this with the University of North Texas, and with Punch from the US Naval Reserve side of things, we didn't want to create something just another damn framework, another universal one size fits all, save the world type nonsense. We wanted to create something that enabled learning, enabled understanding. We wanted to present many different aspects when interconnected and intertwined would help you on the journey to solving some complex challenges in organizations you either work in, support, or coach. And we wanted to create a system that enabled you to explore these different things, but not just from a theoretical point of view, from a practical application point of view. The new book is the how-to guide from the first book, which was the deep theory book. But what Essence is giving me, and what Essence is giving the team behind the work we've done, is the ability not just to explore and to learn about these practices, but how to apply them and how to actually monitor your organization's improvement in many different areas, whether that's better Scrum, whether that's using Wardley mapping effectively, doing better prioritization, solving team conflicts, understanding complex problems in an area where you can't predict an outcome, all these different aspects, whether you're trying to do leadership development, leadership training, whether you want to be able to empower people in the organization, better active listening, better psychological safety, a whole bunch of different things. So this platform helps us to actually explore and learn, but it helps us to actually apply and measure the effectiveness of that application. So it truly is exploration and exploitation. It's a phrase another professor I work with uses all the time. So that's where I see the power of this evolving and developing now. Of course, the development work's still going on behind the scenes because we gave Simon a whole ton of work here, which I didn't realize at the beginning. But this is where we see the power of this driving. I mean, we have another exercise we can run, but I'd really like to invite the audience to give some thoughts, ask questions, reflections. What don't they understand? Do they think this is bonkers, or do they think?
Well, while you're thinking about that, just to give you a minute or two, let's start bring Ivar back in. So there's a picture that I showed a second ago, which is, when we talked about essence earlier, we talked about it, or Ivar talked about it in quite generic terms. And I wondered if you wanted to say a word or two about what essence, I've alluded to it, but what it looks like, what it is, while people are thinking about questions for both of you.
Yeah, essence was designed to be a common ground for all methods. There are two parts of essence. One is a language, which is very small. You can learn it in less than 2 hours. But so it has very few icons. But the important thing is that the language has a well-defined semantics, meaning without that, we wouldn't be able to do, for instance, have many different games going on in parallel. And by the way, to define games would be very hard if you have to rely on intuition only. So thanks to that, we can create hundreds of games that help teams to both just apply essence or sometimes to apply practices. One of the beauties is that essence is quite powerful in itself. So if you know your practices, if you know very well how to do whatever, Scrum, Kanban, user stories, you really can do without having specific specifications of these practices. But if you don't know, and many people are new to things, then you get a very quick introduction to the practice. And the language is at the bottom. Then there is a kernel, and the kernel is includes essential things to work with, essential things to do, the essential competence you need. So what kind of competence you need? And these things are generic. They are true for basically all methods we have, all methods we have had any contacts with. And we started to investigate more than 50 methods. And it does definitely work for the famous ones. So today, as I mentioned earlier, 8 famous methodologists have used essence and to design their practices or methods.
Great, thank you. And just on the screen there, you can see those core bits of the kernel, the things that apply to every team are on the screen here. So opportunity, requirements, way of working, etc. So I'll stop sharing now and pass over to you, the esteemed audience. Have you got any thoughts, any questions? Is any of this new to you? Any surprises? You can unmute or raise your hand. So Johan, you've raised your hand. What would you like to say?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. And maybe the question is for Nigel. If you would, as I understood, you have Amy Edmondson's psychological safety as a tree that branched out to several disciplines. But if you add another, let's say, use Richard Hackman's Real Team or Pseudo Team. Real Team is about interdependence. And you don't have it within the meta model. How would you add it? And how would that affect the other cards and the hierarchy between psychological safety and real teams, for example?
That's a brilliant question. So there's 2 answers to that, very simply. When you actually play or use the physical cards, so Essence comes as physical cards as well, So when you use those, if you've got other methods and techniques, whether or not they're on Essence cards, but they've been introduced by a facilitator or practitioners in a group session, you can interact those, or even just write your own out and interact them and design your own on the fly to then discuss those interactions and those interdependencies. But hopefully the hope is that others that have other disciplines that are valuable will bring them to the Essence platform. And I can tell you now, so far, there's no cost for getting them onto Essence. So this is a way to invite owners of practices and techniques to contribute these to the Essence language, the Essence platform, just like Scrum at Scale, Kanban, SAFe. Even though I'm not a big fan of SAFe, Leffingwell has brought all his practices to Essence. So there's elements of SAFe people are using that can be combined with elements from the flow system and elements from other complementary or other practices from other people who've developed tools and techniques and approaches. So that's the hope, that more people will come to the digital platform, but also just the analog platform that people can use in practice.
Yeah, I'd probably just point out, Dean hasn't brought the SAFe practices to Essence, at least not yet. Obviously, there are some parts of SAFe that are more generic, that are part of Essence, but there are plenty of things that are there. Ken Pugh's behavior-driven development, acceptance test-driven development, Team Kanban, and the example you gave, Johan, we haven't found anything yet that doesn't lend itself to being described using the Essence language that Ivar described a second ago. So I'd hope that we should be able to bring things to the platform, whether it's digital or analog.
But what I'd encourage, Simon, is even if they don't bring it to the platform, because it may be somebody else that doesn't care, if you learn how Essence works, which is a very simple set of visual language cues, then you as a practitioner can take somebody else's practice and create the Essence cards yourself to use in a facilitated session. So it's not exclusionary, it's inclusionary, even if the owner of that practice hasn't come along. And I must admit, behavior-driven development is awesome. I just want to just say that because I've used it for years. Anyway, just a thing, Ken.
No, that's a good point, Nigel. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Kevin Fine, got your hand up.
Oh, maybe.
Sorry.
Kevin? Yeah,
it's me there, Nigel. It's James. Sorry, I'm watching on Kevin's laptop.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Good.
So Kevin is James. Hey, James.
Well, Kevin's here too.
Okay.
But we were just watching, and I was just trying to understand. It seems like Essence is a visual, like, I don't want to say clustering technology, but it's like it's combining everything together and linking it together in a way that helps you to visually understand and navigate to where you're growing. And that kind of combines with the flow system, if I'm understanding this right, because y'all are a conglomeration of tools and techniques and education together. So am I getting this right? Am I missing this? And is the tool we're looking at, like the Miro-like tool, is that Essence itself, the software?
Okay, so I'll answer my bit, and then I'll let Ivar answer to fill in the blanks from you. So Essence is a language, as far as I see. The tool is TeamSpace, I believe it's called, which is a digital tool to exploit and use Essence. But Essence is also an analog physical mechanism through some printed cards, like decks of cards, like normal playing cards. Conglomeration, we prefer to use words like assembly. But it's a coming together of various methods, tools, techniques, and approaches, and allowing you to combine them in different contextual situations and decompose them to their smallest level of coherent granularity and recombine them in context. So it's a little bit more than how you described it, but you're on the right track. Ivar, I'm going to invite you to tell them exactly what Essence is with better words than I used.
No, I think it's perfect. I just want to say that we feel it's very important that the founder of a method or practice is involved in this essentialization process. We work with them, but we don't take ownership of result. We want to be sure that the founder is happy with the result. Not just happy, it's useful and uses it in his daily work. We have done that with a Spotify model, with Kanban. Scott Ambler, Disciplined Agile, has developed several practices using Essence, and he's a big fan of his approach. And Dave Snowden likes to work with us, so we have heard that behavior-driven development and is also involved, and Ken Pugh is here, so I'm happy to have you here. And Tom is Tom Gilb is also a big supporter of Essence and have donated all his work, if I'm not wrong. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, to essentialization. So yeah.
Can I continue real quick? I just want to ask. So the hundreds of games, like that's all involved in Essence itself and captured there?
No, Essence is an international standard, and it includes the language, including that we use syntax that is basically poker-sized cards. But Essence is the standard, and the games and and many other facilitation techniques is something added on top of TeamSpace.
So the gamification, James, because I appreciate for people, there's some cards being held up. Fantastic. Thank you. So the gamification comes from facilitation, from exploration, and different practitioners can contribute gamification. You can use the TeamSpace, which is this interactive environment that Simon's been showing. But at the base, you've got this sort of standard that allows us to codify our different techniques and approaches in a standardized way. And then we've got different exploitation approaches through the physical cards or indeed the TeamSpace platform. Now, I know there was a question in the chat about, is the platform available? Yes, it is. Reach out to the folks at either Jakobsen International, and they will tell you how to get access to the platform, and maybe there can be a plug at the end of this to tell you how to do that. Ivor mentioned Dave Snowden. So Dave's been a very close collaborator of mine, and I'm grateful to Dave for a lot of the learning I've had over the last few years. Some of the people I've been able to work with, he's been like in a free PhD course. Trust me, and when you have a conversation with Dave, anybody will test, it's an instant PhD course.
You always learn something, don't you?
You do ever. So Dave and I and John Turner and others have collaborated now for a few years. And of course, we've created another type of tooling based upon these regular polygons, hexagon type shapes, a honeycomb structure, and that'll be described in the books why the front cover of the book is all honeycombed, unless you're a UK Doctor Who fan. And if you're really, really clever, and here's one for the webinar, the actual honeycomb pattern on the front of the book is a representation of the 1963 TARDIS from Doctor Who, because I'm a Doctor Who geek. So that is true. So anybody who gets the book will realize that's where it comes from. Now, anybody has no idea what Doctor Who is, I think I'm just crazy. But the whole point is here is that we are looking at a way where people can break away from frameworks and fixed methodologies and start to look at complex adaptive systems in a way they can find what contextually works for them. Essence as a set of cards, the hexagon shapes that we've developed with Dave, allow you to do that in an analog way. The Essence cards go down to a great deal of detail, a much lower level of decomposition. The TeamSpace digital platform allows you to do that in a digital hybrid environment, which many of us are working in now, and allow you to do that on an ever-expanding landscape and to retain those landscapes and to come back and review what you learn from it and to alter and to constantly evolve those landscapes as you enable greater learning and greater achievement in teams. We're showing you some of the flow system pieces, but maybe you just want to learn better Scrum or better Kanban or something else, or better behavior-driven development. Or if you're a disciplined agile person, you want to learn how to use those techniques more, This is a system that will help you exploit that in a very user-friendly, very visual way. And we have a hand up from Louise.
Okay. Now, I've paid attention to Essence for quite a long time, specifically when I used to be a methodologist. So I could understand how you would want to look at it and describe things for an organization. But is the intention that actual agile teams themselves use it to do stuff or help them do things? Because most of the teams that I work with actually just want to get work done, and so they have a real problem with digging down in, well, how does this work, how could we be better, all of that kind of stuff, unless it's stuck in a retro.
I'm going to answer to that, Louise, because I spend my life in this world that we challenges us all the time as agile coaches, and indeed I'm in Ireland at the moment supporting the evolution of agile ways of working in one of the major corporations here. First of all, I think that if teams spend too much time just wanting to get stuff done but don't take the time to learn and understand things at a deeper level of understanding, then their level of continuous improvement, their Kaizen, is limited, and the usefulness of things like retrospectives and other techniques is limited, because the idea of this is for us to continuously improve. Now, does that mean that every member of a team, a Scrum team, is going to be a deep sort of scientist in complexity theory or something else? No. Does it mean they need to have a better understanding of what's limiting their performance and how can they solve conflicts or better communicate or better collaborate so they can achieve a higher level of team performance and team effectiveness? And do they understand the difference between team effectiveness and team performance and that type of thing? And that's where the Scrum Masters, the Agile coaches, people supporting the team should encourage that exploration, maybe in a retrospective. Stop building marshmallow trees with pasta sticks and start using some of these tools to better understand some of the techniques. And then we can apply those as continuous improvement items in our backlog, something we call Kaizen stories, to help actually execute on those improvements we think may help us perform better as a team. So that's how I see this being exploited by agile groups, agile teams, Scrum teams, etc.
I'd like to say, in fact, when creating the BDD cards, it took me a while to actually get it down to the essence cards, to the actual smallest little pieces. It was a loop back and loop back. I worked with Simon to get this. And at least from the cards there, it's like if a team, instead of reading a book, wants to just grab a card and try and work on that. It's like, okay, here's something we can put up there, and yeah, we see there's some related things, but how about if we just do this? So I'll call it's broken these topics down into a chunk that may be doable in a retrospective. It now could become the story.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing. And I think that John Turner and Simon would echo your comments there, Ken, about looping back and going round and round trying to break these things down. It is literally, honestly, guys, it's months and months and months of work. This is not a 5-minute thing. The investment in doing this isn't just for fun. We really, truly believe this is a very powerful, even game-changing paradigm shift in how because we're fed up of, Deloitte, Accenture, and all the others, and apologies to anybody who listens to this from these orgs, slamming us with Spotify methods and variations on a theme of safe and telling us this will transform the world and transform your culture. And I've written about this. I call it the transformation myth in the new book. But we want to get away from that and start looking at organizational problems and complex problems in contextual situations and finding what can help us solve for that without having to buy some PowerPoint deck from an expensive consultancy and follow some recipe. And I'm going to shut up because, Johan, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, sorry for that.
It shuts me up.
Does that answer your question, Louise?
Yeah. Could you use it the other way? Because Eva now is going together with Simon and launch an AI support. And could you see that having your flow system, using Essence together with an AI support would give you a feedback on maybe where you aren't coherent with your flow approach?
I'm happy to learn from AI. I think AI will destroy the world and Skynet will take over. But apart from that, Yes, I think you're very wise. I think that if we start to use learning algorithms to do some of this exploration, and it starts to say, hey, this isn't right. And let's be honest, the way we learn over generations is by challenging what went before and building upon that and finding out that some of the things we thought were right were actually wrong. So this is why, again, I describe it as a system of learning and understanding. I'm not giving you a recipe or a methodology or a solution. I'm saying, here's a bunch of things I think you might want to learn. I think they might be useful. And if you look at how these things interact and react together, you might find some novelty that's really useful in your organization. And that's the whole assemblages theory thing. So I'm not trying to give you a recipe or a solution, which is what everybody else is trying to do, which is why it's harder to make these things popular. Because if I turn up with a fancy 50-page PowerPoint and give you a guaranteed methodology and say, pay me $1 million a month for a couple of years, then you'll probably buy it from me. But if I turn around and say that's not possible, you need to think outside of the box, then people, well, I just want to get on and do the work, Nigel. I don't really want to pay for that. So that's the shift we're trying to make here. And I honestly believe, and I was so glad for meeting up with Ivari and giving me access to this. I believe that he's giving us a mechanism with Essence to actually articulate this. And I'm going to be quiet again because Benjamin.
Hello. Real quickly, I don't really have a question. I just want to say thank you to you guys for this work. I mean, if I understand Essence, I mean, this is a language that allows us to codify, these methods or these tools in a way that doesn't devolve the tool. And I'm just picking on Scaled Agile for a second here. When I'm sitting in sessions, in safe teams, for example, the root cause analysis they do there is not what they taught us at Toyota. So I think this is amazing that you're taking these incredible tools and codifying them in a way that preserves their intent and yet makes them accessible to evolve as people need them to. So thanks, props to you all.
Thanks for that. And I 100% echo it. Root cause analysis. I was actually teaching on that today. We're the best one in the world to safe folks, and a lot of the lean practitioners out there wouldn't know root cause analysis if you'd jumped up and bit them on the ass. But the good news is, in addition to the flow system playbook, I'm working to codify all the practices from TPS and lean thinking and get them into Essence as well. That's sort of round 2 of this once we've got the first bit done, because I think it's really important to teach those practices and expose them for how they should be used, not some horrible consultant's PowerPoint deck that thinks point of cause is root cause. And Benjamin would know exactly what I meant by that statement.
James or Kevin, you got your hand up again?
Yeah, I mean, he just kind of covered it a little bit, but I mean, how you're going to have differences, and like you say that you put the creators inside of this space and you want them. So how would Essence or the team come to a conclusion or an outcome of what's the right root cause analysis in that scenario where you have 2 different leaders of thought? Just curious.
Eva, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I want Nigel to talk. He says so wonderful things, so I am totally stunned.
So let me give you this. So I do a whole lot of training on root cause analysis and practical problem solving, Toyota business practice, JKK as we call it in Toyota. So a lot of different types of approaches to address problem solving and continuous improvement. So if people teach root cause analysis and they go and identify a point of cause, not a root cause, and they go and affect a countermeasure on the point of cause, it won't solve the problem. It'll keep coming back. It'll reoccur. So if somebody goes through a practice and goes, we know what root cause analysis is, we go fix this line of code and everything works again, but then we get another bad line of code and then another bad line of code. So we're just fixing the points of cause, but we're not understanding why we keep getting bad lines of code. What's wrong with our development practices, our standards, our training, and these types of things. So if you follow methodology A from vendor or provider A, and it doesn't answer the question, you might go, well, let's have a look what the flow system says about root cause analysis, or some of these Toyota practices, and dig down a little bit. Let's go and follow those, and then, oh, we've now got a better result. Why was that? And they start to compare. So the reality of it is that Essence is a way to codify practices. It doesn't say whether this practice is better than that practice. That's through the practitioner's exploration and understanding. And I come back to this system of learning and understanding. If you truly want to understand root cause analysis, go study Chakotay Kanketsu, go study Toyota business practices, go study A3 problem solving, and then you might understand root cause analysis correctly.
How you doing?
Now you can apply it.
All right. Are you going across the street? Are you going across the street?
Oh, somebody's not mute.
When are you going?
Okay, so
Cross chalk there.
was
Go
my-
ahead, James.
Yeah, that was my question. I just wanted to understand because I even not just in this arena, but in others, it's like you have different schools of thought, and the system, like you're saying, would have both in there as options, and they would be able to see the results of the two different options, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And with Essence, because there's that common ground Eva talked about, both different practices might be achieving the same outcome, but they're just achieving it in slightly different ways. So it's up to you to choose which way you prefer, maybe which way is more effective or more of your preference. But because they're all in the same common ground, you can see that they're both doing the same thing. So it doesn't have an opinion on how you do it, but it has an opinion on what you achieve by doing it.
Yeah, I may have a different opinion on which works better than the other, but that's just me as a person.
So we've got a few more hands. I think
we also have opinions, but we try to be neutral.
Yeah, but when we finish the flow system, we'll have two scrums, for example. The one that we worked on with Ian Spence and Scrum Inc., and the one that we've worked on with Nigel and John.
I just make mention that Dave West is the CEO of Scrum.org, Ken Schwaber's company, has written a foreword for the book, along with Eva and Dave Snowden, so that you will be able to see Dave West's reflections from a Scrum.org perspective, and they were very complimentary. I just want to mention that.
So let's take a couple of questions. I appreciate it's now nearly 20 past the hour of wherever you are in the world. I have put a link in the chat for the competition to win a signed copy of the book if you do feel you have to go, but I'll keep the questions going for a bit longer as long as people are willing to stay and answer them. So I think they come up in order on my screen top left. So I'll ask Andre in Toronto to ask your question, please.
Can't hear you, Andre, for some reason. We have no sound.
Got a double mute somewhere.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So it's more of a comment and looking for a validation, and then I'll follow it up with probably a silly question for Nigel. So if we look at Essence, we can look at it from two different perspectives. One is the people that want to codify a body of work, and then the people that are going to use it.
Yes.
So is this correct? And it's a brilliant way to actually have put some information in a guided way to somebody who tries to solve a problem. So the question that I have, and I'll ask it to Nigel just because I like to annoy him, is isn't this going to create more lazy people?
Oh, hell, there's a question. I'm not going to say I can't answer that, but what I will say is I'm hoping, I mean, look, writing books is hard bloody work. Doing this codification in Essence is hard work, many months of work, as everybody who's involved in this will attest. The fervent hope is it will increase practitioner learning, knowledge acquisition, understanding, and application in a praxis way, and help them to improve the organizational context in which they're working in. Will everybody use it? No. Will everybody spend that investment in learning? And there's too many people get a 2-day certificate with a PDF and think they're a lean agile guru. I mean, LinkedIn's full of them, just change your LinkedIn title and you get a different job. But the reality is the really good practitioners, and everybody's in this room, I mean, I recognize some significant contributors to the industry in this, on the video cameras in this gathering, so that, I'm hoping that it will be the latter, not the former. I guess the next hand up is Ian's. Ian, you have a hand up.
Are you there?
Oh,
We can't hear you. Perhaps if you want to type your question, then we can pick it up.
Hello?
Oh, yes, there we are. Good. Welcome.
Yeah, plugged into the wrong speaker. Anyway, my name's Ian Spence. I was mentioned just now, and I wanted to share some experiences on the essentialization that I did. Before Simon, I probably did most of the stuff, to be honest. But when I was working with doing Scrum, right, one of the things we found within IGI is we couldn't create a Scrum practice because we couldn't agree on what it was. And nobody really cared what we thought, to be completely honest. Nobody wanted Evar's Scrum practice or Ian's Scrum practice. But finding that essence is great, because that puts it out there then, in a way. And I did some co-training with Jeff, which was a privilege. But one of the exercises we did was give people the cards, and they built their own Scrum. And these were like these experienced Scrum masters. And given the pieces, they couldn't even put it back together again, even with the clues on the cards. It's amazing what comes out. But what can happen with Essence is people can take the practices and they can overlay them. They can scribble on the cards. They can do things like, this is ours. But you'll actually be able to compare it back to the original and do some gap analysis and things like that. What we want is teams to own their practices and not all to become methodologists and start selling the thing that worked in their one context once as the, people underestimate the role of luck, right? Unless you've done it 3 or 4 times, it's probably just luck the first time,
I think they're great comments, and I echo them 100%.
And as we see the ecosystem growing, we will see more support for people to have their method as a rhizome or whatever it was, the ginger thing, right? As people can pick up the practices and they can record their preferences, they can, these things are the same, match things together and stuff like that. And that'll be really powerful. But back to, I think it was Louise's question, this isn't about providing a textbook for people to look things up, although that can be useful. I don't denigrate those things. I use them a lot myself. It's the ability to go in and say, like Ken said, and just focus on, well, we're supposed to be doing this practice. How's it going? What's working well? What's not working well? What hints? And once you started to compose things together as well, you can say, this one overlaps with this one. These things are addressing the same thing. I know you talked about root cause analysis in SAFe and all that kind of stuff. SAFe likes to give everybody at least one way of doing the things it wants you to do. But nowhere does it claim they're the only way or necessarily the best way. Right? Their principle is don't ask people to do things and give them those clues, which is kind of fair enough, I think. But that stability to build on top, annotate, that's going to be very powerful. But it's to allow people to own their own methods as one of those, as a gem, rather than get out of tree production, which is what everyone's in at the moment, isn't it?
Well said, Ian.
Pardon?
Well said. Well said. Thank you.
No, I think there was some fantastic things, and I echo everything that Ian was saying. I think we got one question, put the hand down, but I think that ASD, whoever ASD is, has got a handle. If you want to jump in.
Yeah, sorry, it's my initials. My name's Alexi. Just thank you to all the presenters today. It's I must admit, my brain's exploding with all the information that I've had. This isn't the first call of MeetUp call that I've joined where we've talked about kind of essence. I've heard Ivar talk about it before, but my interest has really been piqued tonight. I just, as somebody who's really fresh and new to this, can you guys just share some, whether you do it in the chat or email us afterwards or me, just give me some entry points, you know what I mean? Where can I go first to start knowing more about this? I know in terms of TeamSpace, you talked about Ivo Jakobsen International, contact them, but you talked about a second book that's coming out. All that stuff's great, but if you can just send me in the right direction, because tonight was great, but I've got a lot more processing to do, and I think there's a lot of stuff that's been talked about today that can certainly help in the organization that I work with.
Yeah, I think Alexi, I think Simon will follow up with it. I think, and if I'll add any contribution to that, if we do a follow-up email to everybody who registered for the webinar, And certainly there are some easy access points. There's some great articles on Eva's website that talks about this, and then you can find some assets from us as well, and more will be coming in the very near future. And we want to help people start to gradually get introduced to these things and learn how to use these techniques. And as you've learned from people like Ken and others like Tom in the room and others, and Ian and others have contributed, there's a vast amount of very valuable contributions in essence that are already available, and more are coming fast and furious. And so we want to get people and give them access to this. And my restriction for being involved in this, I want people to have a free level of entry. I want them to be able to exploit and use these things without having to dig deep in a credit card. That was an important point for me. And actually, a lot of the stuff we're doing, we give away as well, because we want to give access to this. We want to help people. And then if some big enterprise comes along and wants to buy 1,000 licenses, that's a whole different conversation. But we want to give the practitioner access to these tools, because it's through you that we'll be able to grow adoption and grow understanding about the things that we're introducing. So we'll do all we can to help you, Alexi.
Thank you. Appreciate it, everyone. Cheers.
I'll put some links in the discussion on the Meetup group, so everybody can see them, rather than trying to scrabble them about now. But yeah, there's a few good start points. Ivar's LinkedIn page is good as well. There's stuff on my LinkedIn as well about introducing the concept of Essence. And there's some Meetup groups, LinkedIn groups that are quite friendly and quite happy to answer questions as well.
Excellent.
All right. It's that time of night for me anyway, and for people in Europe and in the UK. I'm normally in Texas. It doesn't normally bother me, but I've been invited for dinner tonight, so I need to go for dinner.
Well, we can't hold you from that. Thank you very much, everybody. I've put the link. I'll pop it in the chat again just now. If you want to sign up for a signed copy, no less, of the Flow System Playbook, which is the book that we've been working with John and Nigel to essentialize. And there's a form there to fill in, mainly because we can't find a way to contact the winner just from names on the Meetup or on Zoom. But I promise we're not going to do anything nefarious with your data. It's just so that either us or Nigel can send you the copy, depending on where in the world you happen to be living. So please get involved in that. And we'll have another Meetup published shortly. I'm not sure if we've got it all probably confirmed yet, but for those of you that are new, thank you very much. I hope you found it useful and interesting, and thank you for all the questions. And I'll just ask Ivar and Nigel if they've got any last comments, and then we can say good night or good day.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I'm very pleased, and I'm very grateful for all the work that Simon, you've been doing with Professor Turner, and I'm grateful for Ivar coming up with this concept at some point, but I'll leave the final words to the wise sage that is Ivar.
Thank you. I really appreciate this meeting and your words about Essence, Nigel. I think we have been working a very long time to get where we are today, and there are many people that have contributed. It's very important to be said. It's not a few people that have done this. It's hundreds of people have been involved. One key player I want to particularly thank is Ian Spence, who participated in today. His contributions have been very important to the success of where we are today. So thank you, Ian.
Eva, thank you.
So with that, thank you all very much. We'll just do the kind of slightly embarrassing applause for the speakers today. So thank you very much to Nigel and to Eva, and for everybody here for participating. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for that.
And not the least to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. Thanks again, man.